So teaching at Graduate Theological Union has been a wonderful experience for me. As I mentioned, my students are students, they get a ministerial certificate or degree from their respective institutions, seminaries, or whatever it is, and then they come and do a master's or a PhD at GTU. GTU sits just across the street from UC Berkeley. It sits on what's called Holy Hill, which is where a number of religions have their seminaries. And it's a common graduate school for those seminaries and institutes. So it's been a wonderful experience for me because it's given me an opportunity to expand my understanding and appreciation of other religions, as well as being able to share my own religion with others. But just many really lovely experiences with students. Let me just tell you one. Glenn Butterworth was a Jesuit, felt the call to be a Jesuit in his 40s when he was living in Seattle, and came to GTU to pursue a graduate degree. He took both of my courses in Mormonism, and then when he finished the second course, he said, "When I graduate, would you be willing to come to my ordination ceremony?" And I said, "I would love to do that. It would be an honor." So a couple of years later, when he graduated, I got an invitation to go to his ordination ceremony, which was held at a big church in Hollywood. And the church was filled. There were 40 Jesuit priests there that day. There were 6 men preparing to be ordained to the priesthood. And among them was my student. And they went through the ritual of this, and they were ordained. And then there was the Eucharist or the sacrament. And I hadn't really thought much about it, but when I went up to the front to partake of the wafer and the wine, who should be offering it to me but my own student? And it was a beautiful kind of experience. And then afterwards, I was looking for him. I found him in the chapel, and he was with his mother and with his former girlfriend. And I congratulated him on his ordination. And then I turned to his mother and I said, "Your son is not only one of the brightest students that I've ever had in 50 plus years of teaching, but he's one of the best people that I've ever had as a student." And he thanked me, and then he turned to me and said, "Would you like a blessing?" And I said, "What an honor it would be to have the first blessing that you give as a Jesuit priest." And so he laid his hands on my head and gave me a blessing. And last year I published an article called "Ordination and Blessing" in Dialogue, which talks about the loveliness of that experience. I've also been part of other ordination ceremonies by at least one other student. I've had really deep friendships with some of my students at GTU, and then have been working with GTU and with the local Mormon community to GTU, which is called where religion meets the world, is one of the most distinguished schools of theology in the world. And it's really interesting because the people who teach there are not simply scholars, but they're practicing in their own religion. And so there are distinguished chairs in different religions. And so we have now decided to establish a distinguished chair in Mormon Studies at Graduate Theological Union. And as part of that, I've been named Director of Mormon Studies this year in order to help establish that program. But it's been really quite a wonderful experience to work. I've also been, when I was in Santa Cruz, I was on the Santa Cruz Interfaith Council, and for 5 years I was on the Marin Interfaith Council, working with the representatives of all of these religions in order to find ways in which we could not only find common cause, but which together we could make important things happen, dealing with sex trafficking, dealing with homelessness, dealing with other issues that are common to many, if not most religions. So that working and understanding something about other religions has given me a great appreciation for the diversity and the richness of the human quest for the Spirit and the human desire to organize believers into instruments of change, which is what religions, at least in their best modes can be. So I'm very much involved in interfaith work, very much involved in Mormon studies and larger in religious studies. And that's essentially, one in terms of my academic work and my professional work these days, that occupies most of my time. But it's essentially a joy to work in this field and to continue to have an opportunity to expand my awareness of and my appreciation of other religions. Krister Stendahl was a bishop, the Lutheran bishop of Sweden, and was the dean of religion at the School of Religion at Harvard, coined a term called holy envy, in which you see things in other religions you wish were in your own. And I say to my students, I have holy envy for particular things in your practice that I wish were in mine. Then after they have the course, I say, is there anything in Mormonism that you have holy envy for? And there are some things. One, they wish that they had continuing revelation and an open canon, as Mormonism has. That is, that the canon is not closed, it's open, and revelation continues. And that revelation is something that can be enjoyed by any person. Every person is entitled to revelation. They also have holy envy for having a mother in heaven, a doctrine, an enlightened doctrine of Mormonism, which we, I think, do not make enough of, but which they find very, very attractive. They also are attracted to the idea we have a lay ministry and everyone participates. Sometimes I require them to go to a 3-block Sunday service, and sometimes they happen to pick to get the primary children's program, and they say, it's just amazing to see these little children standing up and praying and talking and doing that. I'm going to try to do that when I get my church. So that kind of richness of exchange and respect and admiration for the multiplicity of religious and spiritual expressions has become an increasingly rich part of my own life as I bring the perspectives and the experiences and even the scriptures from other traditions into my own. Teaching at GTU opened the way for me to teach a course in Mormonism at UC Berkeley. I think it's the first and so far the only course on Mormonism that's been taught at a University of California campus. And that class, which I taught a couple of years ago, may have been the best class that I've ever taught. It was just an absolutely wonderful and exciting course. In the course, I had Buddhists and Muslims and Jews and evangelicals and Catholics and atheists and agnostics and Mormons, and it was just an absolute delight to teach that course. And I still am in touch with some of the students from that course. I taught that course at the Institute of Religion, which also sits on Holy Hill, just across the street from the Pacific School of Religion. And one of the really great things about that is that the students from the Institute could come in and sit in on my classes. And also I could invite them, for example, when I did an evening on the LDS missionary program, I could bring 3 or 4 returned missionaries who were students at Berkeley to come and talk about their experience. Or I could, when we talked about administration of a congregation, I could get the stake president and a bishop and a relief society president and a primary president to come and talk about their experience in the church. And so it was really been a terrific opportunity to be part of a religious community that is rich and diverse and that honors and prizes the interreligious dialogue, that encourages the kind of discussion. I'm often invited to participate in colloquia and symposia and conferences at GTU to represent and present a Latter-day Saint point of view, and that's always a privilege. Also been able to host conferences at GTU. The first ever conference on Mormonism in Asia was held here a couple of years ago. The Mormon Scripture Seminar was held here last year. We've hosted the Sunstone Symposia and other conferences, so it's been really, from my point of view, an ideal place for us to be, and I'm hoping that it will, as we work and establish a chair in Mormon studies, that Mormon studies will become even more prominent at Graduate Theological Union.